Welcome to the Monster in My Head podcast, a show where we talk to real people about real insecurities that a lot of us go through, as well as unique ways that we are trying to overcome them. This is a conversation, not an interview, so thank you for joining the convo. I am your host, Bree, and today we are talking to Tallis Rae, who is an incredible artist and ceramicist, and also one of my dear, dear friends who I've known for a very long time. So Tallis, thank you for joining.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're here. So I'm excited to talk about this with you because when I was kind of like thinking of how to name this episode, I was kind of going back and forth between, am I good enough to do what I want to do? And is what I make good enough? And basically what I realized is that the common theme between both of those things is really like perfectionism when it comes to art, but also just perfectionism in general. Which I know is something that you and I have talked about quite a lot. So I kind of wanted to start it off by asking, like, is that something that you've struggled with? And like, when was the last time or last project where you like made something and you're like, I think this is really cool, but I don't know if it's good enough to like give to the world, if that makes sense.
I don't want this to sound like pretentious. I like the first two projects that actually came to my head were two things that I made that were like the first things that I had pulled out of a kiln or had made and like seen the finished piece of, that I was like, oh, this is good. Like, this is truly good. Like, this is good enough to show. And I guess like the thing that was in the way in my brain was that like I don't know how to get it to the world, if that makes sense. I do. No, I think I struggle with that insecurity a lot. More so of like maybe I think this is good, but will anyone else want it? Will anyone else want my work? And I'm sure like it goes the same with your music. Like, will anyone else? I'm proud of this music, but like, will anyone else want to listen to it on a regular basis? You know what I mean?
I think that's definitely the thing that I struggle with. I think probably the most, to be honest, is like you said, like seeing your work and being like, oh my God, like this is the best work I've personally ever made and I'm really proud of it. But then I know for me, it's this like kind of comparison thing of being like, okay, well, I love this work, but like, first of all, like you said, how do I get it out into the world in a way that people will care about it? And even if they do see it, like, is it good enough to capture people's attention, especially with like how oversaturated the industry is with art in general, but also how quick people's attention spans are, so I think for me that's kind of like where the perfectionist part of me comes in, where I'm like, oh, like I'm proud of this, but like, oh God, is my release strategy going to be perfect?
Yeah. And like that's when I go into markets, I think about that. Like, I've sold work at markets before, and I've gone in and had a great day and sold a lot, and then I've gone into other markets and I've not sold anything. So it's like I do have that feeling like, yeah, like every time I go in to a market and you put into all this time into setup and branding and making sure it's easy for people to purchase things, and then like nobody wants your stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting with that too, because that's kind of similar to doing a concert, where it's like you're doing a show and you're like, I hope people show up and I hope people will like this music. And I think that can also play into sometimes the fear of rejection. There is a kind of a feeling of rejection when you put a lot of time in and then you physically show up and you're like, can somebody come listen to my music, or can somebody come buy my art? And there's definitely like a lot of vulnerability that goes into making something so personal like art, or making, anything. And then just kind of like putting it out into the world and like having to not take it personally if it doesn't perform the way that you think it should.
No, absolutely. Really quick, just going off of that, like that was something that I actually like you talk about in art school, is the like not taking it personally. The learning to let go of your babies as you make a thing, and just being okay with like, oh, I have to be unattached enough to this that to be able to let it go. And I know, like,
Mm,
as an artist, like a visual artist, um, like if my work gets into a gallery or if it gets purchased, like I'm
mm,
not going to be there to shepherd my work through the world. I cannot
mm,
be there for everyone who looks at the piece to be able to explain to them, oh, this means this, or
mm-hmm,
I made it this shape to, to explain what they might not be getting.
mm-hmm,
And they're
mm-hmm.
just going to have to look at my work and be like, and think whatever they will. And I'm not going to be able to be there to be like, hey, actually, look at it this way. Or like, do you like the color? If you don't like the shape, like, maybe, so it's just kind
Yeah.
of like
It's like a level
learning.
of unknown in how they're going to interpret
Yeah.
your work and having to be okay with that unknown.
Yeah. Cause like, and I feel like it's maybe a little similar with music where like you make a song or you make a painting or a ceramic piece and you have to just like give it away. It doesn't
Yeah.
belong to you anymore.
Yeah. There's a really awesome quote actually by Rick Rubin that because I come in with quotes and statistics to kind of like
Hmm.
ground the conversation. And Rick Rubin created an amazing book that we'll talk about in a second called Creative Act, A Way of Being. And this book, when I read it, I was really struggling with this need for perfectionism. I was struggling with like, well, why would I even put anything out if it's not going to be perfect? And his whole thing was that creativity is like a way of being, but
Hmm.
also your only obligation in creating is to make it the best you possibly can and then put it out into the world. So his quote says, when you believe the work before you is a single piece that will forever define you, it's difficult to let go. The urge for perfection is overwhelming. It's too much. We are frozen and sometimes end up convincing ourselves that discarding the entire work is the only way to move forward, which is something I've actually struggled with. This whole idea of like the thing that you create, and it might be a little bit different for visual art, especially if you're making maybe smaller pieces. When you're making like a really big piece, like imagine like an installation or like, for
Hmm.
me, it's this album that I'm making, also this book that I'm writing and a podcast and all this different stuff. I'm like, this art is taking so much time and so much effort and so much of
Hmm.
who I am that this is like, this is it. This is the thing. And if this doesn't work, I'm done with art, But because it feels like you're putting so much of who you are into something, but then having to
Hmm.
remind yourself like, no, this is just like a step in the journey, right? Like this is just like another thing that you make that will help continue to make you a better artist and express yourself for where you're at now, rather than have it
Hmm.
be the thing that's going to define you for the rest of your life.
I think like for me, before there was an idea of success, there was just the things that I needed to make.
Mm. And what do you mean needed to make? Like what is that? Like kind of
Like
the internal drive kind of thing?
the like picturing pieces
Mm-hmm.
and knowing or having an idea and being like, oh my God, I know how I would make this look if I solidified it into a thing. Like, I think about what I'm going to make way before I ever think about who else is going to look at it, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my confidence in my ability to make good work is only confronted when I include other people in
Mm-hmm.
it, is
Mm-hmm.
when it truly is like it truly is when I think about like people like trying to sell my work.
Mm.
And because then there's an opinion on the line and suddenly there is a monetary value attached to it versus just me making something that I had a good idea for. And I'm like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, and it looks great. But then when you add other people into the mix, then it's like suddenly there's a new value system and it's not
Mm.
just me.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I can believe the value of my work. You can believe the value of your music. But when the other person is added, then it's
Mm-hmm.
suddenly this there's a new value system. and
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with me and it's out of my control entirely. And
Yeah.
that's what feels so crippling. It's just like, if I put this in front of an interior designer, this big piece, that I spent so much time in, and was like, hey, do you want to give, present this to some of your clients as maybe wanting it in their house? Like,
Mm-hmm.
then it's suddenly this other person is looking at a thing through what gives their job value. And it has nothing to do with what
Mm-hmm.
I look at as good about my work. And that's
Mm-hmm.
terrifying.
Yeah, it's the not taking it personally because the person who's judging it is not like their opinion, yes, has value in some senses. And like you said, that value is more so when the whole monetary thing's attached to it. But like that does
Mm-hmm.
not change the value of your art as a whole. And I
Mm-hmm.
find that actually that concept that you mentioned about the comparison really interesting. Um, there's a study that was published on Psychological Bulletin, and it said it was looking at the different forms of anxiety that people have developed since from between 1989 and 2016, and in regards to perfectionism specifically. And it was saying
Mm-hmm.
that socially prescribed perfectionism increased by 33%. And what that basically means is perfectionism in relation to other people. So it's that
Mm-hmm.
comparison thing, which in my mind, I would imagine a large percentage of that came from social media. We're seeing so many like artists and other people who are doing these things, and it's presented straight in our face in a very curated way. And it's kind of like, oh, well, at least for me, and I won't speak for you,
Yeah.
but at least for me, I see, other artists who are doing certain things, and I'm like, oh my God, well, they're doing all of this stuff, and like, listen to
Yeah.
the quality and look at the response and all this different stuff. And I think another quote says, high perfectionism levels may be blamed for recent increase in mental illness that affect a record number of young people. Millennials are experiencing higher levels of depression, anxiety, and other things than they did a decade ago because of these kinds of perfectionism kind of tendencies, I think, due to
Yeah.
social media. What's been your kind of take as a visual artist on social media? It's very obviously different. With music, it's
Mm-hmm.
like there's a lot of like trend stuff that you're kind of quote unquote supposed to do that I hate and don't want to do any of it. But when it comes to like visual art, what's been your experience, your also perception of social media as a tool?
Yeah. I think it's very much a double-edged sword,
Mm-hmm.
because it is this amazing way, this new amazing way of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple ceramicists specifically I follow, and I know their videos and their work because of TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and
Yeah.
and they, you know, can live off of their work specifically because they gained a following on TikTok, and now they
Mm-hmm.
have this loyal following of people who share and know their work and are enthusiastic every time they release,
Mm-hmm. It builds a
new things.
community around their stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, me as another artist, I'm looking at this and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But also, oh, I don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Or looking at specifically a potter or a ceramicist who I went to college with. So we're like the same age.
Mm-hmm.
And
I know that's a kicker,
are,
isn't it?
yeah, like, and they are, they have a very successful ceramic business, and I'm still
Mm-hmm.
kind of building mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is this, there's definitely this comparison that is fueled by the uh, abundance of visibility that
Mm-hmm.
artists have now, because it's like, oh my gosh, I know at one side, I'm very encouraged because I know it's possible to do this successfully and to live this way successfully.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then at the same time, I'm watching other people have something that I want,
Mm-hmm.
and that's
Mm-hmm.
making me jealous. And
Mm-hmm.
why don't I, what am I doing wrong? And ask
Mm-hmm.
and have all this anxiety and have to take myself down from it.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because something that I've been really thinking about myself is like, what would be the difference in creating art if I didn't see it as a career? Would it be more
Mm,
enjoyable for me if I were to not worry about whether people see it or hear it or interact with
Mhm.
it. And yet, and so the creation process of that would be cool or whatever. But, and yet at the same time, though, I'm like, no, but I want people to see it. I want people to hear it. I want to make an impact with the things that I create. And I definitely feel you with the whole seeing somebody else who's kind of like doing the thing and you're kind of like, okay, yeah, that's cool. I'm glad that you're doing that. I'm glad there's an
Yeah.
example of someone doing that. What even are the first steps in getting there? And like, how do
No,
I, you know?
yeah. Like, and then I start trying to like break down, like, oh, well, maybe I could ask them exactly what they did. But that's going to be entirely dependent on their circumstances
Right. And
specifically
their personality and like what
and
they're
their
good at.
personality and
Yeah.
what
It's
they're
like
good at.
you can't copy anybody. It's like you have to like
Can't
create your
copy
own
it.
thing.
They're, uh, speaking of quotes about comparison, I mean, I think it's a very famous quote. I think it's attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
She's got some good
Um,
quotes.
yeah, but she has this quote that ever since I read it, I think about it all the time. But it's that comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah, totally.
And, I that plays in my head whenever I, think about or judge myself for feeling successful in the
Mm-hmm.
way that I want to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have millions of dollars because I'm selling my artwork every
Mm-hmm.
day. So
Yeah. You know what's interesting? Because you had mentioned about like the everyone's approach has to be different because everyone is different, right? And that also
yeah.
goes into timelines. And I found this really funny story about Da Vinci, actually, who's obviously one of the
Mm.
most famous artists of all time, very, very influential. So it
So
says
it's
here,
scientist.
yeah, he was amazing. He was just a
It was just
all
everything.
mediums. He was just a genius in a lot of ways. But Da Vinci's ambition rendered him unable to deliver many of his commissioned works on time, including perhaps most famously the unfinished Adoration of the Magi. So he was relegated to the responsibility of producing the artistic renderings of criminals who had been executed for quite some time, best exemplifying by the hanging of Bernardo di Bandino Baroncelli. And apparently, it was at the age of 46 that his Last Supper painting became such a hit. What I found really interesting, and that there's a lot of backstory. But what I find really interesting about that is this is someone who had a really hard time finishing his projects. He was just like making a
That's
bunch of
the
stuff.
most artist thing
Yeah,
I've ever heard. He's like, I'm so not thinking about money. I'm so
yeah.
not thinking about the
Even when he's
logistics of
hired
this.
to do
I
something, like
just want to make stuff. And so, like, literally just being so, like, why do I have to think about money? I just want
yeah,
to make
yeah.
shit. Like, that is such an artist thing to do.
It's hilarious to me. And what's interesting
And
about that though,
nothing is new under the sun.
I know we're all doing the same exact thing.
We've all just been humans forever.
What's interesting about that though is I'm can't say this with full confidence, but I'm sure it's true, is that I can imagine all of that art, all of those unfinished projects, everything he did up until the Last Supper, it's what informed him. That skill set that he developed is what informed his later works. So it's
Mhm.
like this whole thing when it comes to timing and having your own journey and just being like making stuff, and even if maybe it doesn't happen the way you want initially, like all our work builds on top of each other, right? Like all of it
Mhm.
allows us to make better work in the future and changes the way that we see our art and all that stuff. So I find it interesting trying to figure out how to find that balance of knowing that creating for the sake of creating, but also knowing that I do want to be a full-time artist and needing to put the monetary aspect of it in there and
Mhm.
the social media aspect of it in there. I don't know, does that resonate with you?
Yes. I have such a hard time. Like a lot of potters will like throw practice stuff and then like
Mhm.
throw it specifically to then like break it down and recycle the clay and
Mhm.
then just for practicing. I have such a hard time doing this.
Really?
It is
Why?
really hard because I think I am attached to the things I make and I do throw things away or I recycle stuff. Like I just did recycle a few pieces. But my cabinets are full of like cups that I've made and we use. They're usable. Like me and my
Yeah.
partner, we use them every day. But they're pieces that I made, finished all the way through, and was like, I know that these aren't for sale. Like
Mm.
I know I'm not going to sell these. Like, these aren't
Mm.
what I pictured in my head. Like these aren't
Mm-hmm.
good, but I can use them. So
I
I just
get
have like
that.
so I think like my version of creating just to create does end up being practice, but then I just have so many cups just because I'm like, I gotta figure out the perfect cup shape that I feel proud enough to sell. And like what's cool though is like recently I just made a batch of cups that are halfway done,
Mm-hmm.
but the shape of them, I was like, okay, this is like this could
Mm.
be it. Where you just like,
Yeah.
you have the thing, at least for visual artists, I don't know how it necessarily works for you who are, is making music, but like you have an image in your head, or
Mm-hmm.
I have an image in my head,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try to get as close to it as
Yeah.
I can,
Mm-hmm.
and then the perfectionism comes in, and if it's not exactly what I thought of in my brain, then it's not perfect.
But at the same time, though, I mean, like you said, it's practice. And
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting thing to think about because I think the way that I've started approaching writing songs now
Mhm.
is, you know, if I get inspired, I just start writing and I just start
Yeah.
doing it and I start putting it on paper and start trying to put melody to it. And then if it doesn't work,
Mhm.
and I'm not gonna like bemoan it. I'm not gonna like sit there and just like try to force it to happen because whenever I try to do that, it doesn't work. But
Mhm.
even if it's not like a perfect idea, I will sit down and I will try to write it and I will like
Mhm.
do my best because I think getting in the habit of making and creating,
Yeah.
even when it's not going to be perfect or it's not the thing, that makes when you have that bolt of inspiration that's like the thing, it makes it easier to actually do that because you have the practice of doing it when it wasn't the thing.
Yeah.
Because that
Yeah.
obviously that sentence was just so eloquent and made so much sense. So
Doing the thing is
the thing
practice
wasn't
for
the
doing
thing,
the
and the thing
thing, and the
is
thing
the
wasn't
thing.
the thing. No, absolutely. Like all the cups that are sitting in my cabinet built the cups that I'm like,
Oof,
maybe these are the perfect ones,
oof,
So
yeah,
it is
100%.
like the talent of just doing it every day.
Yeah.
And I do have a job as a potter now. I teach pottery, and teaching pottery, I make every day that I have a class, I make at least two bowls a day that I end up
Nice.
throwing away.
Good
Be-
practice to even throw away
oh,
stuff.
no, my talent for throwing has grown
Yeah.
exponentially just
Mm,
from teaching every
mm,
day because
mm.
I'm walking other people through how to do it. I'm walking myself through how to do it over and over and over again. My
Yeah.
ability to throw has grown, or to do pottery. I don't know if everyone knows what throwing means.
Throwing means to do pottery, everyone.
Yes, it's like on the wheel. It means you're
Yeah.
working on a pottery wheel. But yeah, so it's I've kind of been forced to learn how to practice and be able to
Mm,
let go of work even when I'm like, God damn it, this is a
yeah.
really good bowl, but I'm gonna recycle it. Because
Good. Yeah,
I would have so many bowls at this point.
just the same amount as cups.
The same amount as cups at this point, yeah, just so many.
Well,
So
and I
many.
think what's kind of interesting about that because that's a good habit because
Mhm.
not only will it allow you to practice, yes, and it'll also allow you
Mhm.
to let go of stuff, but it also shows that like not everything you make has to be Instagram worthy. Like,
That's true, yeah.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
even when you are wanting to make your art a living, it is
Mhm.
okay when something that you make is not to the level that you want it to be, but you made it just for the sake of making it because you enjoy it and like and
Mhm.
also you learn from it and make mistakes. I mean, honestly, like I do visual art, I do painting and I do kind of collage like work, I don't think that I wouldn't really not call myself a visual artist. I just really
Mm-hmm.
enjoy doing it. And that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
honestly the first time for me, I think ever actually, that I've created something without being like, I'm gonna monetize this. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
which is kind of I like kind of needed that because my whole life has been all about how do I monetize and
Mm-hmm.
commoditize my talent and my creativity. And it's kind of like, no, maybe this like could, I mean, I'll show it to people, but maybe this could just be like a thing
Mm-hmm.
for me that I could enjoy doing, and like that
Mm-hmm.
has its purpose, you know?
Yeah. I had to do that with my, I mean, I don't know if people would necessarily consider this art, but like it was a hobby where I crochet, and
Mm-hmm.
I had to just decide I don't have to turn crocheting into, I don't have to figure out
Yep.
the products to make
Yep.
that I can also sell
Yeah.
alongside my ceramics. And who knows, maybe down the line I will, but now I
Mm-hmm.
just crochet for fun
Mm.
and for gifts for people.
Mm.
Like,
And
and
that's
I had
beautiful.
to, it's beautiful and I love it. And it is, but that had to be an active choice in my
Yeah.
brain to be like, it doesn't, you don't have
It's
to do that.
that's
Just
so interesting because
crochet.
I think we're all like so many of us are like that, especially again
Yeah.
growing up seeing the amount of artists that are online, which is awesome. Love that everyone has this visibility, like you said, but like everyone's like, "Hey, look at my work, look at my work." And you're like, "Okay, well, look at my work." And, like some of that work, you don't.
Yeah.
It's okay. You don't need it to be a thing,
Hmm.
you know.
I feel like, especially for our generation, millennials,
Hmm.
not to get all generational on people.
I mean, this is probably a podcast mostly for millennials, so yeah.
No. We are in this weird middle ground between boomers and Gen Z, where
Hmm.
I feel like we're like the boomers, the generation before us, the dog on fire meme, where the dog is
Yeah,
sitting in the room on fire and they're like, this is
I'm
fine.
fine.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
totally fine. So that's the generation before us. They're like,
Yeah.
the world is on fire, but it's how it has always been and it's fine. And then the millennials are in the meme, but we're like, I'm pretty sure the house is on fire. Pretty sure this is burning. I think we should leave, but we don't. But we're still close enough to the other generation to
Hmm.
not know how to get out of the burning house. And then the Gen Zers are like past us enough to be like, this sucks. We're not even in the
Bye.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We already left. Like, you
We
guys are just
already left the
burning.
house. And so I do feel like we're not to get like fuck capitalism, but a little bit fuck
A
capitalism.
little bit,
Like
yeah.
it is not a place for thriving
Hmm.
when you are like the system is not built for people to thrive in it when we're looking at the system and saying, hey, this is actually not working.
Hmm.
Um,
That's
People
a
are
really interesting
tired,
point. Yeah.
but everyone,
Hmm.
but but we're not quite like, I feel like we're just like slightly
Hmm.
too old to really be the ones to affect change because we're
Hmm.
still in it and we're still participating in it. Where Gen Z, I feel like, is coming up being like, we're just building new shit.
Yeah.
And we're still like, we were stuck with parents who were still like, no, this is how you do things. There's one way to
Hmm.
do stuff.
Hmm.
This is how you become successful,
Yeah.
without considering that, you know, the pay gap is widening and the housing crisis is
And
huge.
all the things.
All
Yeah.
the things. So it is this thing
Yeah.
of like, how do we, I feel like it's hard for us as millennials to, we're kind of starting late with the change
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
we went through college, if you went to college or not, but you went through your young adult life being told over and over again by people who still believe in this system, being like, this is how you do, you go to college, then you get a job, then you make money, you save up, you get a house, and it's all going to be possible if you work really, really hard. Not to get weird and
Hmm.
political. If this is not where you want this to go,
Oh,
let
but
me
it's
know.
so real. This is real.
but it's real because then us as artists being like, you know, in our late 20s being like, wait a second, or even just like coming out of school and being like, wait, I don't want to be participating in this, but this is the only thing I've been shown how to do.
Also,
And
the
I,
only definition of success that we've been given. You are only successful
yes.
as an artist if you are making a living with your art, is what we've been told.
And if you participate in a specific way,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
one way to
Yep.
participate. And it's like, for me, even the art world is this huge problem because it's so exclusive, it's so exclusionary, and it's all kind of pandering to people who can afford work that is thousands of dollars
Wow.
each piece. So it's pandering to a very small demographic, and it is and your success depends on if someone who has enough money likes your work.
That's so interesting because music is almost the exact opposite, where
Mm,
artists are trying to pander to everyone,
mm,
doing the exact same thing. And that is
mhm,
usually, the very like specific trends on TikTok and all this like social media stuff, which again is not bad. But
mm,
like, that is not what you're inclined to do, if that is like not, if that gives you anxiety thinking about it, like for
mhm.
me, one of the reasons why I started this podcast was because I was like, first of all, it goes with what my whole album is about with you, which is, looking at the issues that we have and working through them and, being real about it, being authentic and having these kinds of
Mhm.
awesome conversations. But I was also like, I want to create content that matters to me and that could be helpful for people. I don't really want to do the trends. What would it look like to be creative in the way that I create things and present
Yeah,
things and not try to do what everyone else is doing just because that seems to be the formula for success? And
yeah,
it's like, not, like, I mean, not necessarily. It's like you have
yeah,
to have that, be able to believe in your own uniqueness and kind of be like, what can I do that would make me happy, but also hopefully get me towards the goals that I have. But even if I don't make those goals, I'll still be happy in the process.
yeah. I think there was a lot of letting go for
Mm,
me where it needed to not be so filled with anxiety.
mm,
The pursuit of art
mm,
and
mm-hmm,
the pursuit of success with art.
mm-hmm,
And I think, yeah, I think the anxiety of will people like my work is very much an anxiety built and instilled by a system where that is the only way to survive. That is the only way to be successful, is if
yeah,
someone likes your work.
yeah,
A gallery
mm,
runner, a collector, a just anyone.
yeah,
And at least in terms of the art world, there is that anxiety of then if you aren't successful, there is like, it feels like a level of shame
mm,
that
mm,
you're, if you end up doing something commercial, then
mm.
you aren't really a successful artist,
That's such
which
bullshit.
is so shitty
Oh, that's such bullshit.
because all art at its creation was like for a purpose.
Yeah.
I think about, even the professors that I learned
Mm-hmm.
from,
Mm-hmm.
and, how my school and the artists I learned from told me this type of art is
Mm-hmm.
art. Like, I remember a drawing professor who I really loved. He was a wonderful man and he really helped me a lot. But there was this moment where a drawing of mine looked too like um like an illustration. And
Oh no,
he literally was like, illustration is an art. And I was like, huh? And
sir.
he was like, it's illustration. It's just its own thing. It's not really art. And I was
My
like,
God.
I'm so sorry. What did you just say?
What's
And
so funny with that is that, like, because I've heard stories about like this in art school before. by a lot of people. And I also recently heard about Van Gogh, which I'm sure you know the story. But apparently, Van Gogh went to art school and they were like, you suck. You are so bad. You're so bad at art.
The only people he sold work to when he was alive were like his family members. Like his brother, like pity bought his work.
But what's so cool about that, even though it's kind of sad, but also what's cool about
Yeah.
that is he was like, fuck it. I'm just gonna make something different from what. Okay, and you have to fact check me here, but what I heard was that he took a canvas out to like a desert or a place with a lot of sand, and he literally just took paint and was just like slathering it on while like sand and shit is like blowing in the wind,
Yeah.
and he's just out there just making stuff. And
He
what's so
painted outside, was like
right,
he painted like at the location of the
right.
things he was doing.
And so he was trying something different and he was trying something new,
Hmm.
and everyone was like, that's shitty. And then he became the one of the most influential artists that ever existed ever. And it's
Yeah.
because he decided that he wasn't going to go by the standards of what was acceptable. And when you were talking about illustration and all this different stuff, I was thinking about trends. You see this
Hmm.
with music as well, where it's like in art, in music, there is a certain trend of where art is at the moment, certain things that you're kind of supposed to do in order to make it commercially viable, all that stuff. But then everyone does it. And it's like there's nothing really unique about that. But then when you try to do something a little bit unique, then it might not be commercially viable for a while. But like if
Yeah.
you believe in it and you love it and you're like, this gives me joy, that could also be the thing that could actually like change culture. Like, and then you've seen that
Yeah.
so many different times. That's something that I'm kind of like trying to figure out with when it comes to this book that I'm writing, where it's a story that deals with both conscious and subconscious exploration of trauma
Hmm.
and growth, and it mixes poetry and lyrics and paintings and illustrations and all this different stuff that I've not personally seen before. But I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm not an author, fuck it, I'm just gonna do it because I think it's cool and I'm gonna put it out, and if no one sees it, at least I made something that I can be super proud of,
Yeah. That's something I definitely need a little bit of,
Mm.
because I think I do still have that anxiety of like, well, you got to do it. There's a way
Mm.
to do this. And if I'm not
Mm.
doing it the right way, then I might as well just not do it. I haven't posted on social media for a pretty long time
Mm-hmm.
as well, because it did feel not true. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to post work that I like didn't feel proud of,
Mm-hmm.
or like I feel
Or
like a
like
lot
when you
of
say
my
proud of, do you mean like didn't hit the standard in your mind that you felt it should hit, or like you actually weren't proud of your work?
I didn't want to force myself to share something that was, I guess, just for me.
I understand that. That's what we were
Like
talking about before, of creating just for yourself.
yeah, where it is like I so enjoy the process.
Yeah.
I love the whole thing. And I've always thought of art as this like problem to solve almost. Like I always say, like
Totally.
I start my work with a question.
Mm.
And I hope by the end I have an answer, but I
Mm.
don't always. And so a lot of
It's a
the
puzzle.
time it is
Yeah.
just this thing where a lot of my work is almost just practice, because I am
Mm.
in my head just being like, what kind of cups do I like to make?
Yeah.
What cups, what shape is best in, how does the shape feel in my hand?
Mm-hmm.
How many shapes can I try?
Mm.
What what does the design look on this clay? It feels like this big experiment. And even when
It's
I'm making
exploration.
bigger,
Yeah.
yeah, like even when I'm making bigger work, that's like less useful and more like an artistic piece.
Mm-hmm.
it still is a lot of the time in my brain this like, could that work? And the excitement of trying
Mm-hmm.
is so part of it
Mm.
for me that I almost like get to the end of a piece sometimes and less of like, is this worthy of showing, and more just like, I'm done with the question.
Mm.
And so it's
That's
like
cool.
not interesting anymore to me. And then I'm like, would people want this? I don't know.
I love this. This
I
is
don't
really
know if this makes
interesting.
any
No,
sense.
it definitely makes sense. So it's funny because I feel like what we're talking about right now are two different problems of perfectionism.
Okay.
One of them, and not you having those different problems,
No,
are
no, no,
different
no. Keep going.
approaches to
Yeah.
the different things of perfectionism. And one of
Mm-hmm.
them, which I love, is this concept of creating as a form of exploration and
Mm-hmm.
trying something different every time that you make, but then not sharing
Mm-hmm.
it. And then the other one is creating specifically to share based on what you
Mm-hmm.
think people are going to want. So I think
Yeah.
for anybody listening, whichever one you maybe identify with, I kind of want to challenge all of us to kind of like explore the other side a little bit. So for Tallis, for you, it sounds like it would be doing your amazing exploration and trying different things which you already do so well. But then what would it be like to share it? Like I think
Oh, Jesus.
I know. I
Wow.
have this
I
quote
didn't
by
know you
Rick
were going to give
Rubin.
me homework.
Well, I have a quote by Rick Rubin's giving it to. He's saying, "One of the greatest rewards of making art is our ability to share it. Even if there is no audience to receive it, we build the muscle of making something, like we were talking about, and putting it out into the world. Finishing our work is a good habit to develop. It boosts confidence despite our insecurities. The more times we can bring ourselves to release our work, the less weight insecurity has." So I think maybe for people who struggle with that, the whole concept of releasing it and just putting it out into the world, and then maybe for the people who struggle a little bit more with creating within the bounds of what we think is going to be
Mm-hmm.
commercially viable and consistently releasing a bunch of stuff that maybe we're not super proud of, what would it be like to take this different approach of creating something really unique and really different and trying something that might not work and putting it out into the world and being like, we might not be as accepted, but we're gonna show this exploration process. You know what I mean? I think that'd be kind of cool. I'm actually gonna try that for myself because I'm like
Okay.
I need to put stuff out into the world because I'm also doing exploration and I'm like, well, it's great. I have all of this stuff and no one's gonna see it.
I yeah, I think like sharing is definitely something where I'm like, ooh,
Yeah,
because
it's
I
vulnerable.
do, it's vulnerable, but I also am like, I have a lot of thoughts. Like I talk to myself in my car
Mm-hmm. Me too.
so often of just like monologuing
Yeah.
about like, oh, I have this thought and I'll think through it better if I just talk. And
Why
so
do you
I
think we're
literally
doing this
turn,
podcast, Tallis? This is
yeah, like
exactly what
I turn off my music and I just like talk
Yeah.
like I'm explaining it to somebody else. And then like, and I'm like, wow, these are really good thoughts. But then nobody hears them.
Maybe
And I'm
we
like,
should start a podcast.
maybe I should start, which I've thought of. I've fully thought of. I've also thought about like just talking on TikTok, and something is so
Yeah.
different. But something is so different to me about like adding an audience.
Total. Oh yeah, totally.
And I
Totally.
think it goes into, again, that anxiety of like, if it's just me, if I
Yeah.
am the only standard,
Mm.
then I do great.
Yeah.
But then I add somebody else and I'm like, I could be an idiot
Right.
according to them,
Yeah.
according to them. And that changes the whole thing.
And you know what? What's weird
I
about that is
think
that
about how I talk when
right.
I consider an audience, you
But
know?
you will be an idiot to somebody else, to somebody. Like no matter what, no matter who we are, what we do, what we put out into the world, somebody is going to be like, "This is shit. This sucks. This person is stupid." And it's like, but are we,
It's
and this
true.
is a challenge for myself as much as anybody else who wants to take it, are we going to allow their possible, not even guaranteed, possible perception of what we're doing, what we're creating, to dictate whether we even put ourselves out there or not? And that is a challenge for myself because I'm like, oh, I just want to keep my art safe with me. They're my babies. And I don't want anybody to judge them. I don't want anyone to judge me as I'm in this self-discovery process. But like,
yeah,
we're depriving, like weirdly depriving the world of our unique contribution by not allowing ourselves to put it out there, you know?
There's a art advisor. I wish I could remember her name right now. She's on TikTok, and she talks about like the logistical side of art, how to get in touch with curators, how to email people, blah blah blah. And she just gives like tips on TikTok. And one of the things she always hits is she's like, people will come, artists will come up to me and be like, oh, I'm doing this really cool thing, this project, but nobody seems to care, and and she's like, okay, well, who knows about it? And they're like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, have you emailed anyone about it? Have you told anyone about it? Have you shared about it?
My therapist has told me the same thing.
And
she's like, have you put it out? And I'm like, no, but no one will care.
Yeah, and so she's like, well, how are people supposed to be interested if it's not out there? Which is another, but then also like, I think that's a circle back to where we started at the beginning of this conversation, where it's like, we want to keep our babies safe.
Yeah. But it's like, our baby's gotta grow. Our baby's gotta grow. Fly.
And also, like, we need to make room.
Yeah.
We need to make room for the new stuff we're gonna make.
Make room on those shelves with all the
cups like literally, I need more space. I need more shelves or more space. Like, I need, and so like,
start recycling the clay.
Yeah, like letting them go is, and I have so much work that I started with, and now I'm so far past talent-wise and interest-wise that I'm like, I almost don't want to show this anymore because it doesn't feel like it's very truly not where I am.
I think that's
anymore.
Why we have to document it while we're doing it.
Yes.
Because I agree. I don't want to show recordings that I've done years ago, because I'm like, I'm a better artist, I'm a better musician now.
Yeah.
But that's why we have to like do it in the moment, which is so hard.
Because that work is still valid.
Yeah, it's still valid.
It's built, and there's lots of people who will want to own it. Yeah. Like, I'm always shocked by work that I'm very hard on, where I'm like, ew, this is gross, or like, oh my God, this is so like beginner level or whatever. And then I show it to someone, or someone sees it and they're like, oh my God.
Yeah, I've had that happen.
You made this?
And I'm like, why do you like
and I'm
this?
Like, really? You think that? Gross. Like, I'm judging them for liking the work that I made. Like, that's so harsh and shitty. But that's like, real. Yeah, it's real. And I'm like, I need to stop being so harsh and shitty on my own work.
And also, I mean, that's kind of being harsh and shitty to ourselves when we do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Being like, the thing that you made during this time is so shitty, and like, you should be ashamed of it. Like, that self-talk is like,
I'm embarrassed for you for liking the thing that I made.
Right. That's so damaging to ourselves. Like, why would we be motivated to make anything else if we're talking to ourselves that way? Like, the shit that you made is gross. Do better. And your creative self, your inner child is like, I'd rather not. Like, I'd rather not try now, because you're being so mean to me.
So mean.
I've definitely done that for sure. I'm really trying to be better.
I'm just trying so hard, and like, I think in some way it is like kind of a blessing though, because I have all this backstock of stuff where I'm like, I'm ready to get rid of it. So I want to go do markets and try to sell this stuff, because it is the stuff of like, I need more space. Please buy my things. I need more space to be creative, which is what I really want to do. Yeah. So it is almost like you're doing me a favor by buying my work. Please take it off my hands.
Totally. Totally.
But then I'm recently, I was talking to my partner about doing markets next year and being like, well, I need all this, like, you know, applications to markets take, you need certain documents and whatever. And he was like, okay, well, what do you need? And I was like, well, I need photos of a booth set up, but I don't really have photos of past markets because it just slipped my mind. And he was like, okay, well, is there a space you can set it up? And I was like, yeah, I was actually thinking of like asking my friends if I can set up in their yard. And he was like, okay, what about the first weekend in December?
Mm.
And I was like, what? He was like,
A
well, you said that's what
timeline?
you need. Yeah. And I was like, ew, why? What?
No, I want this to be
No.
nebulous, actually.
Yes,
This is
now
something
I
that I
have so
could
much,
do.
now there's pressure and I actually have to do it. And he was like, yeah,
Yeah.
like, I'll
Yeah.
help you. It'll be fine. And I'm like, but then what if it's ugly or I do it and I realize it looks weird? Like, if I actually do it, then there can be things wrong with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
But
but
man,
that's like,
you need someone who's going to do that for you. And that's actually something that I would love
yeah,
to do eventually, is maybe set up accountability groups for artists. Like, there's so
yeah,
many ideas, but something where it's like
so many ideas.
so many ideas, but like just to like encourage each other just to fucking do it. So like if you're listening and you have a project and you're like, I really
Tell us about it.
tell us about it, but also release it. Like, just this is your sign to put it out into the world. And if you don't put it out perfectly, it's fine. It's just do it. Just do it.
Just do it. There is a quote an old mentor told me one time, where when I talked to her about being like afraid and scared or anxious, and she was like, okay, do it afraid. Be afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh God.
I hate it.
I hate it. But then, but then I kind of use that template to kind of apply to things where it's like, okay, I might set up my booth with what I have on hand as a practice booth. And I might be like, ooh, I know this can be better. I should still do it even if it feels imperfect.
Yes.
Do it imperfect.
Do it imperfect.
Well, it's not perfect. Okay, do it imperfect.
Yeah. Oof. Come
Just do it imperfect.
I have a song called Unperfect, but it's exactly about that, of like, it literally goes, I'm unperfect and that's okay. I'm doing the best that I can today. If that isn't enough, then what could be? I'm unperfect perfectly. And like, don't mean to quote my own song, but like literally that though, of just like, just it's okay. Like it's okay to like not have it. Also, what is perfect, you know?
But it's also this thing of like, it would be better for me to have photos anyway, you know? And then when I'm able to set it up in a different way, then I'll take new photos then.
Right. You know, so somewhere.
You have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And also, again, going back to like, I'm going to look at this and be like, judging it so hard, but then I send photos to someone and they're like, oh my God, that's so charming. Or, oh my gosh, I love that. It's such an inviting little booth. They don't know all the things that I'm like, well, I would like it to look like this instead. Like nobody else knows about that.
Totally.
But I do. And so I'm sitting here like,
you're your own worst critic, and you're the one who's getting in your way. My therapist literally was just like, you just like need to get out of your way. Like you have all these great ideas and then you're like, no, I can't. No, I won't.
But it, like, again, the artist, the art advisor on TikTok, she was like, the thing that artists are best at, the only thing that feels natural to them, that will come naturally to them, is creating. And going back to Leonardo da Vinci, it was Da Vinci, right? Yeah, that you mentioned earlier, where like, it's very clear what felt natural to him, and it was exploring his ideas, and it was making things, and it was experimenting, and that's what comes naturally to me as an artist. It's like, I want to sit in my room and be in that exquisite place in my mind where I feel confident, I feel strong, and like when I'm making things, because it is all consuming and it comes so, so naturally to me.
Flow.
It's the flow, and I could do it forever without showing a single other person, because that is the part that is natural.
Right.
We're in our heads so much, and we're getting in our own way because that's what comes naturally to us. We are in our minds. We are creating, we are thinking, we're problem solving. We are wondering about what colors to use and what notes to how to apply our medium to translate what is in our brains. The logistics side does not come naturally, baby. Like that, me having to price a piece of work, gross. That's yucky. I
But
don't want to
like,
think about that because it
yeah,
doesn't come naturally to me. What comes
exactly.
naturally to me is the headspace
But the
of being
only
like,
way that we can get better, and
yes,
I see this for myself too, the only way that I can get better, the only way you can get better, we can get better, is if we challenge ourselves in the things that are difficult and being like, okay,
gross.
yeah, like I can do this creating part all day, but like, how do I get like motivated to be like, this is super fucking hard. This whole logistics thing, this whole
Yeah,
posting thing, this is hard. But
yeah,
because it's hard, I am going to make the
we still have to
extra
do it.
effort to do it because I know, and that doesn't have to be with a certain result in mind you can't control. It can't be,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing this so I can go viral. It's like, I'm doing this because this is the area that I'm weakest and I need to just choose to
Mm-hmm.
do it anyway, no matter what the result is. That's how I'm thinking about my art, bro. When it comes to this album, this podcast, everything, I'm like, I can't control whether people hear it or not, but I can
Yeah.
control putting it out and being consistent with the work that I do. And that is a challenge for me. And so I'm going to see that as successful no matter what happens because of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think maybe if we can, like, you know, as we're kind of coming to our close here, and with that of being like, what areas can we challenge ourselves in that don't feel natural to either create the best work possible and to put it out into the world when it feels uncomfortable, do the things
Yeah.
that challenge us so that we can just become better artists and better artisans and hopefully also maybe make a living doing our art. So
Mm-hmm.
to end the podcast, I always ask, what do you have any recommendations when it comes to the topic of perfectionism of art? Are there any books, podcasts, or influencers, content creators that really inspire you with this topic? I can start, one of them being The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin is probably one of the most amazing creative books I've ever read. Really helped me redefine what it meant to be successful in my mind. And weirdly enough, there is a book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It is by this like Marine SEALs guy. He was one of the I think he's the only person to ever go through all the different training camps in the military. He's as
Wow.
hard. He's a just freaking. He's like a monster, dude. But and you wouldn't think that would be inspiring for this, but for me, it was this whole thing of you just need to fucking do it,
Mm.
and just whatever is scaring you, take pleasure in like the pain and do it because you know it's going to help you grow and it's going to challenge you. So that really,
Pleasure in the pain.
yeah,
Goodness
girl.
gracious.
That's where my mind is at right now, girl. I have to be there. But what about you? Are there any recommendations you have for everybody?
I'm not a big nonfiction reader, so I
Mm-hmm.
don't have
It's okay.
any like books that I've read specifically like about perfectionism. I think I will suggest though, if you're afraid to put your work out there, I think start with a small group. It doesn't even have to be together or cohesive, but start with a few people that you genuinely trust their judgment.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to share your work with everyone, but start by showing your work. If it's a book you wrote that you're scared to have people read, if I think two things. First, figure out if you do actually want feedback. If you actually are
Mm-hmm.
doing this
If
to
you're
put
willing
out
to
in the
take the
world.
feedback, yeah.
because you might think about it and be like, you know what, right now, no, I don't think,
Mm,
I think this is just for me and I'm okay with where I'm at. Am I happy? Yes. Do I need to be looking for this? I think figure out if it is something that you want to make for the world or if you want to make for just you.
mm-hmm,
And if you do genuinely want to make it for the world, but it is still crippling to think about having criticism or feedback,
mm-hmm,
find 3 or 4 people in your life that you genuinely think are wise, that you genuinely think their judgment is sound, and give them that access to yourself. Share
mm-hmm,
your work and allow them to give you feedback. Then practice sitting with that feedback, deciding what is valid and what is not,
mm-hmm.
and then go with it.
So good. So that's a good way to end. Thank you, Tallis, for coming
Yay!
on to the show and talking and giving advice. If you like the show, please subscribe. Please like it. You can follow Tallis. Where can people find you? Where would you like people to find you?
Um, Biggest place is Instagram. Tallie Rae, TallieRaye.
Perfect.
Tallie Rae on Instagram is where I post a lot of stuff. I'm also on TikTok as
Ah.
Tallis Rae, and then I have a website that's just Tallis Rae Ceramics, Art and Ceramics, there where I sell some of my work.
Yeah, so go check out her art. She has done the thing of putting it out into the world. So go celebrate that and support her by buying it. And thank you
I
so much
try
for,
so hard.
yeah, girl,
I try so
we're
hard.
trying so hard.
Oh God, I try so hard.
But thank you for listening and like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.